Aloha, and welcome to the third and final episode of Talk Story with House Majority, our third season. My name is Della Albalati, and I'm the State House Majority Leader representing the areas of Keiki, Tantalus, and Punchbowl. It's my pleasure to be here on this program. We have an exciting program. We did a far fewer episodes this season, but I'm really excited about this day in particular. It's a historic day for Native Hawaiians. Today, this morning, Governor David Ige signed into law Act 279, House Bill 2511, which makes a huge commitment of monies towards the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. In fact, as Director Chair William Ila said, it is the most significant investment made, most consequential investment made by the state in the history of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We have some special guests here. Our very special guest chair, Nakashima, Mark Nakashima from Hawaii Island, who's going to be here to talk about some of the important legislation passed. In addition, we have a very, very special guest from Hawaii Island who we're going to bring on later on into the show, so please, you have to stay tuned. For you today, we also have a discussion about the veto overrides. Today is July 11th, 2022. Tomorrow is the governor's deadline to veto any bills of the 2022 legislative session. And we, of course, have our community segments to share with you on our visit to Hawaii Island. This is the only episode of Talk Story where we've had the opportunity since the waning of the pandemic to be able to go out and visit our neighbor islands. So I was so fortunate to be able to visit Hawaii Island. I want to introduce you very quickly to Representative Mark Nakashima, who's joining with me. Say hi, Mark, to the audience.
Hello.
We're going to first cut to a video segment of Hilo Medical Center, where I get to visit the wonderful facilities on Hawaii Island that Chair Nakashima has been so instrumental in supporting. So let's take it away to Hilo Medical Center. Here today at Hilo Medical Center with the CEO, Dan Brickman. Dan, I was here maybe 3 years ago, way before the pandemic, and there were so many exciting things happening. So pre-pandemic, what was happening here at Hilo Medical Center?
I think a lot of time and effort was spent on building our infrastructure around just providing great health care. There's so much behind the scenes that you see at a hospital that honestly most of our patients don't, but if we want to grow and improve, we have to invest in that. So I would say those years were a lot of tee up to doing some really great things.
And COVID hit. We shut down, but hospitals were still working. What was happening here at the hospital at Hilo Medical Center?
Well, I think like everyone, we were like, oh my gosh, right? And how can we manage this crisis? And then it changed constantly for 2 years. I think one thing that came out of it is really the need to be flexible and also to focus on your community, because there was a lot of apprehension. And hospitals were put in a position where in some ways they were responsible not for just providing the shots and so forth, but also educating and reassuring the patients. And then when we, of course, unfortunately had a lot come to the hospital during some of the surges, our staff really had to step up. We were full 1.5 times. It was like I couldn't believe that we could keep finding more places for patients, but the whole team responded admirably. It was like a really good thing.
So in addition to the critical care that you folks continue to provide throughout the pandemic, you were also still focused on building out the medical center. What kinds of exciting things were happening during the pandemic that we now see coming to fruition?
Well, it's a great question. I love talking about that. But we were fortunate all the way through the pandemic to still be able to keep our plans and our expansions of service going through that rough time. We had plans to build or expand our cancer services here. I think you saw some of those when you came the last time. And there's a building going up across the street, so we'll have more space to do infusions, and people who need cancer treatment, they don't have to fly. They can get that treatment here. It's really tough on patients when they have to leave. That building should open in December, and I think it served the purpose of keeping the community working too. It's not a small thing. It was, during the pandemic, a lot of people were worried about jobs jobs and so forth, and that was very helpful. And then for a long time we've been focused on heart attack care, cardiology care, and that's been in the works for years, and it's really come to fruition. We were able to get our first cath lab working, and now our second one is operational. We're not only treating heart attacks on the east side of the island, but now we're getting most of the heart attacks that occur. It's like, not that we really want them, but it's the best place to treat them. They don't have to fly, and it really saves a lot of lives. So that's been really exciting for us in the last couple of years.
So as we move out of the pandemic, what are going to be some of the future plans that Hilo Medical Center might be looking at?
So great question, and we're really, I guess if I summarized our in a couple of sentences or in one sentence, our plans is just to have a lot of great care close to home. So you don't have to fly to get, I guess, the things or the health care that you would expect in any size community like this on the mainland or in any of the other islands, right? I think we big island folks deserve that, but it takes a long time to get there. So we've been adding just incrementally to different services like urology and pulmonology, the common diseases, unfortunately, that we all have to deal with, to have those services here so you can get your health managed. And again, make sure it's high quality. So we can't go indefinitely. We just want to get to the right size for our community.
Well, I'm so appreciative because, I think everyone here in the state is connected to one another. I have family here in Hilo. I know that people come and travel here, live and work here, and just every community deserves the health care that you folks are providing here. So one last final thought to our audience was, if there's any one message you want to share with our Talk Story audience, what would that be?
Well, and maybe most of this is directed to Big Island people, but we treat everyone as our family, our friends, our neighbors, and that's what drives all our caregivers here. And if you have to come and get care here, rest assured we'll do our best for you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
It was such a treat to meet and greet with CEO Dan Brickman. But today I have here with me in the studio in our live Talk Story with House Majority Studio, Representative Mark Nakashima from the Big Island. Mark Nakashima, Chair Nakashima, Chair of the Judiciary Committee, was first elected in 2008. He has served as Chair of Labor, Chair of Economic Development, served 4 years as Vice Speaker, and now currently serves as the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Chair in the House.
Yes.
Chair Nakashima, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, so Hilo has undergone some tremendous changes. That segment we just saw took us through things that are happening at Hilo Medical Center, but we were just chatting right before this. We were visiting Hilo. It was one of the last finance site visits we had. Can you tell me a little bit about what some of the plans were at Hilo in 2019?
Yes, in Hilo in 2019, we were looking at expansion of the oncology center, and I think there was a reference to it in your clip. But the oncology center at Hilo Medical Center was very cramped. It was small. People were waiting on top of each other for in the waiting room and things of that sort. And so, one of the things we were looking at is an expansion of the oncology center, as well as being able to do more clinics as part of our Hilo Medical Center's overall plan. And so, those are things that we were able to do recently for the improvement of healthcare on Hawaii Island.
So that's been a real passion of yours over the years. Can you speak to some of the challenges of healthcare on Hawaii Island?
Yes, healthcare has had a number of challenges. There's always not enough specialties available on the island. Getting in to see a doctor may be a challenge. And so one of the things that we have been able to do is provide more services on Hawaii Island for the people on Hawaii Island. One of the biggest things is the catheter clinic to deal with cardiac problems on the island. So a lot of times, if a cardiac patient came into Hilo Hospital, they would be prepped and made ready to travel, but then they have to travel to Honolulu. And by the time you book the air ambulance and actually get them there. Precious time is lost, and during that time, your heart is just getting more and more endangered. And so, a lot of times we can get them to Honolulu only to have them die, a few days later. And so by having the catheter center at Hilo, they can fix the problem there and then prepare them for transport in a more timely fashion so that their heart is not dying, waiting for treatment.
Well, I think that whole notion of care on island is so important. So I'm glad that you are such a huge advocate for your community. And I know that Hawaii Island is doing quite a bit with teams and doctors and nurses and physicians and pharmacists. Can you speak to anything about the pharmacy school?
So one of the things that we are fortunate to have is the pharmacy program at UH Hilo. And right now, what we're looking at is care teams to address people's concerns, medical concerns, as well as dietitians and all the kind of the full patient, so to speak, across the board. And so by having the pharmacy school there, by having all these other specialties brought into the picture, you have a much fuller healthcare picture than if it's just the doctor trying to figure everything out.
So I know you have your hands on everything Hilo. So what are some of the other problems that are now emerging? I think we were talking about some transportation issues in your community. What's going on?
Oh, yeah. One of the problems on Hawaii Island is the infrastructure is a good 60, 70 years old. Some of the bridges we have along the Hamakua coast at one time carried trains.
Wow.
And so, they've been converted to automobiles, but they're kind of old and aged, and so one of the problems we've had is a couple of the bridges have gone from being full bridges to being limited to 12 tons, and so that precludes a lot of the tractor trailers from using the Hamakua coast as a artery of transportation, and that's really caused some headaches on Hawaii Island. It makes a already tough supply chain even tougher, and it just adds time to the wait between when the shipment leaves and when it actually arrives.
So part of the job then is the work that we're doing with the State Department of Transportation, making sure these bridges are renovated and fixed, making sure that we partner with our federal agencies. Is there anything happening with the State Department of Transportation?
So there is a schedule for repair. However, over the years, I watched that schedule slip as other priorities come up. It is a statewide system, and so although Hawaii Island has a lot of state highways in it, it's just a small part of it, and definitely not the biggest population center either. And so being able to be sure that that we get our fair share, and maybe a little bit more than fair share because of the great amount of highways that highway miles that we have. Just in my district alone, from end to end, it's about 80 miles.
Well, I think this is where our partnership with our congressional delegation is also very important, because there are funds for rural areas, and your area certainly is definitely rural.
Yes, definitely.
So there's healthcare, there's transportation. You serve as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and we've seen in the last few weeks a lot of issues around women's rights,
Yes.
Concerns about what the Supreme Court of the United States is doing to women's rights. But we have something that's very, a tool in our toolkit, Title IX.
Yes.
What kind of things have we done with implementing Title IX at the state level from your perspective as Judiciary Chair?
So, one of the things earlier this year, I was invited to a blessing of a new locker room for girls softball. And I had not realized it. However, I'm told that before they built this locker room, the girls would have to dress at the PE complex, walk the 100 yards or so to the softball field, past the parking structure and down the park, and then they'd have to go back and in order to shower and change out of their uniforms. And so it's kind of a small thing, but you're just realizing that providing equal access to locker rooms near where you're playing your games is also kind of a critical thing, and a necessary equality that we have to put in place for girls sports as well. So just having the sport is not enough. Providing them the amenities that come along with that is also very important.
Well, I appreciate that insight, because I do think, yes, we need to make sure that the facilities are equal, and we've had this historic opportunity now with funds to be able to invest in facilities to make it a level playing field. Did the legislature also fund more positions to help with implementation and enforcement of Title IX?
Yes, we did put in place this year a number of positions that looked at creating more equality in Title IX. We had a expenditure this year to bring our public schools also up to par in terms of facilities and other needs to ensure equity between their sexes.
Well, again, I'm so appreciative of that. And our next clip, right, this speaking about the importance of equal access to fields and facilities. The next clip that I'd like to introduce is from one of your partners from Hawaii Island delegation, Representative Christopher Todd, who was instrumental in getting an appropriation to build out, I think, the first softball field that will be built out for Hawaii Island. And it may even be the first softball field in the state. I'm not sure. We'll have to check up on that. But let's go to that next clip with Representative Chris Todd, where I was able to visit with him in Hilo, Hawaii. So we are here in beautiful Hilo town, the site of some new state facilities that will be going up. I'm here with Representative Chris Todd. Chris, can you tell us where we're at and what's going to happen here?
Yeah, we're right here on Moho'uli Street, right at the front of Kapiolani Elementary School. And we have a couple of projects pending right now. We actually put about $750,000 into completely redoing and renovating the softball field, which is really important because there really isn't a public designated softball field which has different dimensions than a traditional baseball field. So a lot of the schools utilize this field to practice or to participate in games when they're not kind of playing at UH Hilo's campus. So this will be the first of its kind on the DOE side on the Big Island. And then beyond that, right in front of us over here, they're about to break ground on what will be a brand new covered play court. And that funding, it's kind of gone through the works. You had the initial plan design funding, you had subsequent funding for the actual project, and it's gone through the process, and we're about to break ground, and I'm sure that'll be a really big help since it rains all the time. So everyone should have a covered play court on this side of the island, and we're really happy about that.
That's awesome. And the other thing with the softball field is also it's going to be Title IX funding, where it's going to address some of the Title IX needs. Can you speak to a little bit of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always been top of mind, but especially within the last few years, there's been the recognition that that we really need to do more, particularly within the DOE, to address some of these issues and equity in general. And this is going to go a long way. Hilo is full of baseball fields. You have obviously a very extensive, generational commitment to baseball. We recently had the state champion Waikea High School baseball team, but more needs to be done specifically to address that inequity. And I think this will be a really important step in the right direction.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about Hilo Town with me. Is there anything you'd like to say to our Talk Story with audience, as this is actually really the first and only time Talk Story with House Majority is actually going to be off of Oahu?
Yeah, it's kind of an exciting time here in Hilo. I think you're starting to see maybe a little bit of change. You're starting to see a little bit of renewal, particularly in the downtown area. And a lot of people around my age are starting to move back, which is always a welcome thing. So as that happens, I'm really excited to see kind of what new ideas they can bring right here into Hilo, which is, outside of adding a Walmart, a Target, a few things like that, is really not that different than when my mom grew up here. So I'm really excited to see some change for the positive and some new fresh ideas come into the community. What will become the Portuguese Cultural Center, which works really well in conjunction with grant money that the state has provided for that construction. And that's actually going to happen probably about a half mile away, right up on that hill. And it's a really good example of a little bit of everything. You have the private sector, you have government stepping up, you have individuals providing that support, and we're really excited to see that actually culminate. And same thing, the ground, they're finally about to break ground. They have a contract in place.
Wonderful. Thanks for having us here, and we will see you in Hilo Town. Aloha, and welcome back to Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Albalati, and I have here as my special guest, Chair Mark Nakashima, and my very special guest, Dr. Noe Wong-Wilson, who is the Executive Director of Lala Kea Foundation, a Native Hawaiian cultural nonprofit, and you have over 10 years of experience at UH Hawaii Community College.
Correct.
Okay, so let me frame this a little bit. This was a historic session for Native Hawaiians. This morning, the governor signed into law House Bill 2511 that makes a significant $600 million investment in the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. But another story of this session has been about the Mauna Kea Working Group and House Resolution 33, which resulted in House Bill
2024.
And now we have a new authority, or Mauna Kea agency. So take me through the story, because you folks are kind of the key players in the Mauna Kea Working Group. In 2019, there was conflict on the Mauna.
Mm-hmm.
There was protesting, and in 2020, occupation and a lot of turmoil and strife. In 2021, House Resolution 33 gets introduced by Speaker Scott Saiki. Many of us in the House had hints of maybe what he would want to do, and Mark, you can talk about it. Did you know about this? Did you know about House Resolution 33 as it was being dropped?
Yes, I did know something about it. When I initially took on the judiciary chairmanship, I had experienced what was happening on Mauna Kea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked to include Hawaiian affairs as part of my portfolio, so that I could. There were a lot of concerns that Native Hawaiians had that I could not deal with, but those that I felt I could, I wanted to have the opportunity to leave my fingerprints on the concern.
Now that I see that, I mean, I remember when you asked to have Hawaiian affairs, and I was like, "Are you crazy? You had judiciary, and now you want Hawaiian affairs." But it worked out. I mean, it's really worked out this year.
Yeah, it has, and I was very fortunate to meet partners like Dr. Wong-Wilson to help guide me along my journey. Working to better the condition of the Native Hawaiians, and so I've been very fortunate.
So Dr. Wong-Wilson, we talked a little bit about this, but House Resolution 33 gets dropped by the Speaker of the House. Did you have any idea about it, and when did you get the call?
No, I didn't have any idea that this was coming down the pike. I got a call actually from Speaker Keiki the night before he made his announcement on the floor of the House on the opening day session in 2021, calling for the Mauna Kea working group to be formed. He had called me the night before and just said, I'm going to make an announcement tomorrow, so listen in. And I thought, okay, what a strange phone call.
We get a lot of strange phone calls, but you know what? That's sometimes how it works, I think, you know? And so when the call happens, what did you do?
Well, I watched it on TV the next day to see what he was all about. Called a few friends and said, watch TV. I don't know what's going on, but we did hear him and hear his speech and the announcement that he was forming a Mauna Kea working group. So it was quite a surprise to all of us, especially after having experience, the trauma and the emotion of being on the Mauna for about 9 months. I was part of the group that occupied the access road. And so I just want to mention that this coming Sunday is the 3rd anniversary of the arrest of the kupuna. So beginning this week, 3 years ago, was when this all began on the Mauna Kea access road. Certainly not the beginning of the conflict about the development on Mauna Kea, but for this chapter. It began 3 years ago. So a lot has happened in that 3 years. And here we are. So,
So one of the things, Mauna Kea was a watershed moment, I think, for all of Hawaii. And I think we were first confronted, I think, with a lot of things have been brewing and kind of under the surface, and then this happened. And I think this was really a watershed moment. So I will share with you that I think as we saw this resolution coming through, a lot of us were like, what is going to happen with this working group? And I think all of us were a little skeptical. And I can remember like, okay, we're going to get this resolution through. We just have to trust in this process. We have to trust in this working group. So we passed this, and this is in the middle of the pandemic. That's what people don't realize. You guys were doing this all via Zoom. So this resolution passes. We get out of session in 2021. Mark, tell me about how you first set up this working group, and what were your thoughts bringing this diverse group together?
Well, I think on my part, there was some apprehension, knowing that there were parts of both sides of the story sitting at the table. Did leave me some sleepless nights. Not to mention the fact that I was coming off some health issues.
I want to put a point in this. I want to put a point in this and tell the world this, that the day of your first Mauna Kea working group meeting, I wanted to scold you and tell you, get off the phone because you were in the hospital. But you, the person that you are, you kept at it and you pulled that first group together, right? On the day that you were in the hospital, correct?
Yes, I was.
Well, we were so fortunate that you got through that. You convened this group. Dr. Wong-Wilson, from your point of view, you've come into this is a diverse group of people you don't really know. What was that first meeting like? What was those first couple of maybe weeks or months like?
Well, first of all, when I was asked if I was willing to participate in the working group, my answer was no, and it was no for the first few months, I think. I really didn't see how this was going to succeed, and I was concerned that although the House resolution was passed, House HR 33, that it didn't involve the Senate. And I kept asking that question, how is this going to work, and how do you foresee, even if something came out of the working group, that there's going to be success at the end, given that only the House set up this resolution and this working group. So I really was hesitant, and a number of us were very hesitant, and it took a lot of I think, repeated phone calls with Speaker Keiki and others, and I myself talked to a lot of community people, a lot of our kia'i, our protectors, who were committed to our movement on the Mauna. And I think the bottom line was that if we didn't make sure we had representation on this group and send people to be a part of this effort, that others would have to sit in our place, and then where would we be? You know, we would still be outside the door without a voice. And so that was, I think, the turning point where we decided, okay, then let's get a group of us together and see if we can submit our names. And there was a process to names being submitted, and I have to acknowledge the community organizations, and especially the Hawaiian Civic Club Association, whose members really took this to heart and made several recommendations for people to sit on the group and on the Mauna Kea working group, and that was how it began.
So tell me, how many people were on the working group, and
we had 15 people on the working group. It was pretty evenly divided between those that supported the astronomy program and those that had concerns about astronomy and its impact on the Mauna. And we started off the discussion just kind of getting to know each other. And it was, I think there was some apprehension and concerns about how this group was going to work out. And fortunately, in the end, we were able to develop if not a real understanding or a respect for each other's positions. And moving that forward, we were able to come up with a recommendation for the House to take a look at.
So my understanding is that there was a lot of consensus building. You guys spent over a month or so just getting to know one another.
Right.
Dr. Wong-Wilson, can you speak to a little bit to that?
Sure. And I think that's an important part of this to understand, because when 15 of us were put in our Zoom room together, we did most of this over Zoom, and many of us, a few of us knew each other, but many of us didn't know each other, or we only knew each other because we had been on opposite sides of the table, you know, through the discussions over years. We weren't given a guidebook, right? We weren't really given.
There was nothing predetermined.
No,
People
nothing.
thought it was predetermined.
No,
but there's
absolutely. They gave us a copy of the resolution and put us in a Zoom room and said, okay, your deadline is December. And this was in July. And so, you know, we started with, oh, my gosh, how are we going to do this, right? Well, we decided to first, before we could even get into significant discussion about any of the issues that are in front of us, we needed to get to know each other. And so we took the time to do that. And we really spent time over Zoom giving each other time to talk about ourselves and share who we were and where we were coming from and what we thought about the mountain, our personal connections to Mauna Kea. And that was followed by some really great work from Antipua Kanahele and other cultural practitioners on the committee that would, then we laid a foundation that we all discussed thoroughly and came to stand on, that we could agree as to the cultural foundation that is so important for those of us who are practitioners to believe why the Mauna is important to us. But we really went around the table and talked about how Mauna Kea was important to everybody and their own perspective. And it was only after that, which was nearly 2 months, nearly a third of the time that we spent together, before we could come to that place where we could start talking about the really hard issues. And I'm glad we took the time to do that, because then we were able to have these really hard discussions, but with a lot of respect for each other. And while it wasn't without emotion, there were some tearful moments, I think, for all of us through the process. I think we were able to at least come up with a full discussion about how we could form an entity, which was our charge, right? And stand up an authority or create an authority that would replace the current managers of Mauna Kea, of the summit area.
So the working group came up with significant management structure recommendations and management policy recommendations. Just mechanically, how did you guys determine what made it into the report and what didn't? Was there some kind of voting procedure or consensus rule that you guys came up with?
Yes. So one of the things that we agreed early on is that there would need to be a supermajority before anything made it into the report. And so that's, about 10 people,
10 out of
10 out of
15.
15 in order to make it into the report. So some of the more contentious things do not make it into the final report. However, a lot of things that did make it into the report did reach that supermajority requirement, and so that in itself, I think, built the trust among the group. Also, another thing that I had asked the group early on is that nobody go running to the media and just tell one side of the story. That before anybody went out, they would get agreement from all of the people to allow that to happen. And so, that kind of got the media a little on edge. However, many of the people I spoke to were also respective of that decision to move forward in that manner. And so, there weren't very many leaks from the agency, from the group
From our
either.
group. Yeah, I think it was a matter of respect for each other and a confidentiality in that we would be able to bare our soul or to put all of our thoughts on the table, and not feel that information would be taken out of context. And so there's a trust that was built up amongst us, and everyone kept that agreement in place. So that was good. And we tried to also honor the fact that the community had a right to know about what we were doing, and so we tried to balance that with periodic reports. And I know that was frustrating to some people, but that was the only way that we could see how we could actually tackle some of the really big issues and still be able to come out on the other end with a recommendation.
I think what you guys really speak to is about the deliberation that it takes and that the space you need to really consider some different ideas potentially, but also to have those tough conversations. So what I would like to share with everybody is that the report, which was over 153 pages, is available on the House website, in addition to all of the summaries of your folks' meetings. And you had many, many, many meetings. So I think what I'd like to do in our last several minutes together, because this is a story that actually I think needs to be documented, because it's a different process, I think, in the sense that we ended up with a product that no one knew what we were going to have, but it was so thoughtful. And I guess for me, as an outsider to this working group process, one of the persuasive things that came out was I'm going to say it wrong, but the decadal study, where the National Science Foundation or the academies weighed in on this process. And what it told me was that Hawaii is a model for how we can collaborate. So, Dr. Wong-Wilson, I know you have a special story about that. Like, what was that all about? What was the connection with the National Science Foundation?
Right. So in 2020, in January, I believe, of 2020, the Astronomy Association had their annual meeting here in Waikiki at the convention center. And normally it's just a gathering of astronomers from around the world, and then they do their business. You know, they have an organization of all of the entities and the people who work for them, and they do their business. But because they were here in Hawaii, and because we were already occupying the Mauna Kea Access Road at that time, and the issue of the TMT development on Mauna Kea was really contentious, they made room for a few of us to come down from the mountain and to participate in their event in Waikiki. That, with a handful of our own native scientists from the University of Hawaii at Manoa mostly, who wrote papers that were submitted for the decadal study, the decadal survey as well. And then our few of us who participated in the workshops with astronomers talked about community engagement and how important it is, and a little bit about the history about Mauna Kea and why we were in this conflict. And so it was really the first time that the Astronomy Association opened their doors for a community group to come in like that. I believe out of all of that and the pressure that they felt in our community, as well as the good work that was done by our native scientists and our community members who attended, there was a section in the decadal report which was finally released this past year. And that decadal report section included recommendations about astronomy facilities, how necessary it is for them when they determine where to place themselves, how important it is that they understand the indigenous framework and have a place for the indigenous voice, because ultimately it's on some native land, you know. And so that is a new turn of events for the whole profession of astronomy as the decadal report.
So it gives me chicken skin because I looked at that as persuasion to pass this bill, and it made me feel comfortable to pass this bill. But I had chicken skin because what I said was that Hawaii can lead the world, and you folks were leading the world. You were showing and setting an example. I want to shift now, and I know we're going to run out a little bit of time. Well, let's go for maybe a few more minutes. The report comes out. You make recommendations about management structure, policy. Chair Nakashima, it gets to you now and the legislative session. And you're right, the resolution wasn't a concurrent resolution. So give us a little bit of a taste of what it was like this past session to navigate this bill through both House and Senate. And I want to give a shout out to Chair David Tarnas, who was very instrumental in making sure that we could do this. Give us your insights as we wrap this segment up.
So as the bill went through the House, there were concerns because we know that the water land chair on the other side had indicated that she was not interested in moving the measure. And I think that there was some discussion about that, and that if the bill was dead on arrival, then that it would mean eventual end of astronomy as we know it. And fortunately, the referral on the Senate side was somewhat of a surprise, but not unexpected, that Senator Makalo Kim was the one as chair of higher ed to be the lead on the measure. And it was very refreshing to work with Senator Kim on this level, because I've had other experiences with her when she was Senate President, and to see another side of her as we worked together was very refreshing, and really helped to drive the end result of the Mauna Kea bill.
And so there was, in fact, a lot of cooperation between House and Senate, and I think we really worked through this tough issue, and the community stayed involved throughout the whole process. Were you folks involved in the testimony as well?
Yes, I testified at every single hearing. It was really challenging from the community perspective, and it was exacerbated, of course, by the pandemic and the fact that we were still pretty much doing things from Zoom. And then I live on Hawaii Island, I live in Hilo, so I wasn't present on site for any of it. It was well, this is what I always say. I feel like I was thrown in one of those old washing machines, that go around like this, and then you get popped out at the end. And fortunately, the short story is the conference draft, which was a combination of both the House and the Senate conferees coming together and really working hard to come up with a draft that was something that we all felt comfortable with, right? I mean, of course, I don't think anybody got everything that they wanted, but we were really surprised from the community side at the end that the conference draft was not objectionable, right? Like we could live with it, and that there was a lot of work still to be done, but that it survived and has now become law. It's amazing.
So I really want to say, democracy is a work in progress, and I think this is really amazing. There's still a lot of work ahead, but I want to thank both of you, because I think you have both, and all of the members of the working group, and then the legislative leaders who really pushed this through, because I think it gives us a new path forward on something that was a watershed, cataclysmic moment in our history. So thank you both.
It was. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
So obviously, Hawaii Island is a source of a lot of activity. We want to cut next to our next community clip where we saw, again, Hawaii Island members stepping up to lead during the pandemic. I'd like to share this next community clip where we revisit with members of Hawaii Keiki Heroes. So I'm here in Hilo at CU Hawaii Federal Credit Union with Rebecca Choi. Rebecca, you just started here on the job, but during the pandemic you were part of an exciting project. Can you tell me a little bit about how Hawaii Keiki Heroes got started?
Sure, yeah, thanks so much for asking. So Keiki Heroes is a community project that started exactly about 2 years ago, summer of 2020. With the onset of the pandemic, we were really concerned about how our kids would be able to adopt behavior change and all the new things that we're needing to do to stay healthy together. So we developed a program to help them adopt and the ohana learn together of the safe practices, wearing our mask and distancing to help our community.
So we had the opportunity to meet with the inspiration of Hoku. We talked with her earlier, and this was the first coloring book that you folks did.
Yeah.
Let's Stay Healthy Together Hawaii, and it was distributed as the vaccines rolled out. But there's some exciting things happening with Keiki Heroes now as we're coming out of the pandemic. So what's new?
So the new book that we created is called Kai and Hoku Explore Foods of Hawaii, and with the effort of introducing local vegetables and fruits in partnership with the Debucks program, the Food Basket, and Tiana came in at Farm to Keiki and Center for Getting Things Started with Komingwei. And we thought it'd be great to introduce to our children across Hawaii through Kai and Hoku how to explore our local fruits and vegetables. And we know that's really important for Keiki health.
And you're going to be partnering statewide with the new organization. Which organization is that going to be?
Yes, it's Hi-Fi, considered the Hawaii Public Health Institute. And actually, that'll be our new home for Kai and Hoku, because our community group was not a formal organization. And we had wonderful fiscal sponsors with Next Tech programs and Hawaii Science and Technology Museum. But we wanted to find a forever home for Kai and Hoku where they can grow and expand in programs that help Keiki across the state. So Hi-Fi will be taking it on, and we're really excited about that partnership.
So excited for you. Talk to us about the partnerships you had with groups like CU Hawaii.
Yeah, so with part of this Keiki Heroes program, we built out a business partners program where we partnered with community organizations across the Big Island where kids can drop in and get incentives and learn more and get resources. So we believe that the partnering with community organizations is so critical, right? That we all have our networks and we all have our connections that we can reinforce. So CU Hawaii was a business partner and a sponsor of Keiki Heroes, and so we want to continue to build upon that to work with organizations across the state to really emphasize and uplift our Keiki.
So one of the big lessons we've learned is that partnership is what helped Hawaii really get through COVID as a community in partnership. So if there is one thing you want to share with our audience, one final message as we come out of COVID, as we continue to move forward, is there anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, we just want to thank our community for all your support and coming together. We feel like continuing that effort, learning from what we have during the pandemic and moving forward together is really important. It's also in terms of building the ohana and supporting our kids, the next generation of leaders.
Thank you, Rebecca, and best of luck on all of Kai and Hoku's future adventures.
Yeah, thank you, Della. So good to see you.
So I'm here in person in beautiful Hilo with Basil Al, who was the inspiration of Hoku in Hawaii Keiki Heroes. Basil, we were talking about a year ago, virtually. We were in the middle of the pandemic. We still didn't really know if there were going to be vaccines at that time, or there might have been vaccines, but it was just starting to roll out. Tell me, what are some of the things that you learned from the pandemic?
Well, I've learned that from the pandemic that usually it's like the parents that are like telling kids to be careful, like have done stuff. But Keiki Heroes was like, well, kids have to learn too. So I would like go around like my school telling people like, oh, can you please put your mask on? Like, I don't want to like try to spread the virus and stuff because I want it to be really safe.
So now that we're coming out of the pandemic, Hawaii Keiki Heroes has gone kind of statewide, and your likeness is gonna be plastered in coloring books all around the state. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm actually really excited, and I was working with them a lot. I like went on the radio, I read one of their books, and it was really exciting because it was like I'm part of something big.
Yes, you certainly are, and you've inspired a lot of people and a lot of adults too to also talk to their kids and share with their kids and have their kids learn and share with others about how we can take care of ourselves. So what are you looking forward to most now that the pandemic is almost over or we're coming out of it?
Well, usually like when I would go to my friend's house, it would be like, oh, have you been exposed to anybody? Has anybody in your family been like sick or something? And then we would always have to be careful of every single detail in our lives. But as the pandemic is coming to a close a little bit, I can be less careful, but still kind of while being careful. So it would be kind of like less stress off my shoulders.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are going to do wonderful. I'm really excited about what's going to happen with Keiki Heroes. We'll be talking with some of the adults later, but if there's one message you want to give to the public out there as one of the representatives of Keiki Heroes, what would that be?
Is always believe in yourself. Like I was, when my brother asked me to volunteer, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. Like I'm kind of nervous. Like I don't know if people will actually hear my message, but they did. And it was really exciting, and I was really happy to see that people was looking and hearing my message, and that was that kids can make a difference too.
You certainly
not just
have.
adults.
Thank you so much, Basil.
So I want to thank Rebecca and Basil for welcoming me to Hilo, Hawaii to tell me their story about Keiki Heroes. Again, so much coming out of the pandemic. Chair Nakashima, I want to kind of wrap up here. We have the last few minutes of this final Talk Story episode. What do we have to look on the horizon from your vantage point, either as the representative of Hilo or as chair of the Judiciary Committee?
Well, as chair of Judiciary, I think the rulings by the Supreme Court give us some pause to think. I think that Hawaii is in a much better place because we already have some laws in place protecting women's rights, and we will see what else we might be able to do to strengthen the position of women in our society.
And Hawaiian Affairs, since we still have Dr. Wong-Wilson here, as well as you, Chair, on the front for Hawaiians, what are things that you're looking to in the future? And then we'll end with you, Chair.
Well, for me,
Yeah.
I think it's about the new authority and getting it stood up and getting the right people appointed to the board. So that's going to be a really important move.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Now that the work is done in putting the authority in place, making sure that the right people are appointed to the positions are equally important, because they're the ones that will be carrying that vision forward on our behalf. And so it's really important to make sure that we have the right people with the right mindset going forward.
And then pivoting from Mauna Kea to today, what happened with today's DHHL bill, any thoughts on how we're going to follow through on the $600 million investment to DHHL?
Yes, I think as Chair Isla indicated, it's kind of a watershed moment. It's a historic investment in the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and we are hopeful that we are able to bring that to fruition, because just putting the money there is just half the battle. It's making sure that we clear off the wait list and get Native Hawaiians onto the land, as the 100 years ago that promise was made, and we're still not quite there in fulfilling it. And so hopefully we've come a long way today by making this investment in putting Native Hawaiians back on the land.
Well, I want to thank you again both for just the tremendous amount of work that I know you put in pre-session. People who say that the legislature works only part-time does not know the full story, and it really is a partnership between legislators and community. So I do want to thank both of you for joining me, for doing the work that you do, and I just wish you both the best in the future, and that I know that there's more work ahead of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on that note, I want to thank the audience of Talk Story with House Majority for joining me on what I think is going to be the last and final episode of Talk Story with House Majority. Just a little bit of background. Talk Story with House Majority was born out of the pandemic. In March 2020, we had shut down as a state, and we needed a way to communicate. So I want to thank all of you who have listened in, tuned in for the last 3 years. We've had 3 very successful seasons. We've had 30 guests in the first season, 50 guests in the second season, and a dozen or so this past season. It has been a format where I have been able to engage with representatives across the state, my colleagues, who I am very proud to work with, and who I'm very proud to be House Majority Leader in this great state house. We've been able to speak with community leaders like Dr. Noe Wong-Wilson, but so many leaders who came forward to talk to us about the pandemic, who came to talk to us about needs in transportation and healthcare, and also education and mental health. We talked with community leaders across the board. I also want to thank our executive leaders in the executive agencies, as well as the judiciary, who stepped forward to share with us what was happening during the pandemic. It couldn't have been without these guests that we made this show a success. Finally, I'd like to thank all of the staff who put this together in seasons 1, 2, and 3. My staff, the House Majority staff, as well as the Olelo staff, who you will see their names at the end of this program. Please, thanks from the bottom of my heart to all of those who helped make this show such a success. If you'd like to see episodes of Talk Story with House Majority, you can visit us at our HawaiiHouseDemocrats.org website, or visit us on Instagram to get links to Hi House Dems. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please stay safe, stay well, and we hope to see you at the next legislative session. Aloha.